What was the worst rule your school enforced? In my freshman year of high school, we had a terrible vandalism problem. The bathrooms would be broken in various ways almost constantly. In a stroke of pure genius, the staff decided that any bathroom that was vandalized would be closed for the week on first offense. It would be closed for the quarter for second, and permanently on the third offense. They took back the rule after closing every bathroom on day 1. Story 2. They decided everything bad happened in the last 5 minutes of lunch, so it got 5 minutes shorter each year. Any group of more than 5 had to be up to no good, so no groups over 5 as well. Edit. This was not some big city public school for troubled kids. It was a tiny Catholic school in a tiny farming town. The worst offense by student of the whole time I was there was some kid walking across the street to get a soda from the store. Story 3. If you were involved in a fight, you got suspended. While it sounds reasonable, context didn't matter. I got suspended once for not throwing a single punch kick or whatever. I got suspended because someone knocked the books out of my hand, and when I reached down to grab them, they punched me in the face. I got suspended for walking down the hallway and, unprovoked, getting punched in the face. Screw Brandon Valley Middle School. This is probably one of the most egregious examples of why no tolerance policies don't make sense and don't work. Context always matters. Well, almost always. But in these scenarios, yes, it always matters. Story 4. My high school mascot was Daniel Boone holding a musket. A kid wore a Guns N' Roses shirt to school and was told he had to change shirts because of the pistols on the shirt. He pointed out the hypocrisy of the school mascot and they changed everything. The mascot was switched to holding a flagpole instead. Every instance of the mascot was changed from the multiple signs outside and around the school to the giant picture in the middle of our basketball stadium. Holden, you're a freaking legend for this. Okay, on one hand, fair play. School changed everything. On the other hand, I feel like that's not what they should have taken away from this, though. But that's more of a personal belief. So, hey, as long as they're enforcing it for everyone, including themselves, I guess I can't be too mad. Story 5. They banned hats because, quote, hats can be used to signify gang colors. The only major crime group in our area was the Hells Angels, and they certainly weren't having people wear hats for children to signify their allegiance. It was so bad a few years after I graduated, I came back to volunteer as a chaperone for a school trip as a favor for my favorite teacher. The principal saw me wearing a beanie from across the school, and he literally sprinted half a mile to chase me down and tell me to take it off. When I told him I wasn't a student and didn't have to follow the dress code, he said, "Take off the hat, leave, or I'd call the cops." It wasn't the actual day of the trip. Just had to show up to get the itinerary and stuff, so I just said, "Screw you, I'm out, idiots." Story 6. I love telling this one. We had percentage grades, and if you earned 100% in a class for the semester, you'd be dinged down to 99% because, quote, only God is perfect. As far as I know, this was not an official rule, and I only know of it happening one time, to the girl who eventually became our valedictorian, but that was the reasoning she was given. It was a Catholic girls' high school, and there were a lot of other weird, strictly enforced rules, especially around the uniform, but the only God is perfect rule will always take the cake for me. Story 7. My high school banned t-shirts that had the cover of Rush's album Signals, an album popular at the time, which features an image of a dog sniffing a fire hydrant. They considered it scatological because the dog was about to pee on it. This struck the entire student body as extremely stupid, and roughly half the student body picked a day to wear the t-shirt. We won. Story 8. We were all given these ugly planners at the beginning of the school year with a few pages at the back filled with, quote, hall passes. If you didn't have your planner or if all your boxes were filled, you weren't allowed to go to the bathroom. And no, you couldn't buy a new planner or borrow one from a friend. The only excuse you had was if you had a doctor's note, but you're not going to have a doctor's note for an upset stomach caused by the school lunch. Story 9. My freshman dorm at a religious college had a list of rules that filled a legal-sized sheet of paper. It included being in your room for forced study time every night, keeping your towels straight on the towel rack, making your bed by 9 a.m. every day, including weekends. So if you wanted to sleep in on Saturday morning, you're supposed to get up, make your bed, and then go back to sleep on top of the sheets. For college dorms? Like, you are all adults there. Who's doing room inspections for your sheets at 9 a.m.? Like, I get it's a religious college, but hey, I gotta be honest. I think God has bigger problems to worry about. Story 10. Involved in a fight? same punishment regardless of fault. And this led to more dangerous fights due to everyone just going for it. Saw people use chairs, cricket bats, or anything just to hand. Getting expelled from the school was really hard as it was the last chance school in the area, and after that it was the special reform school. Story 11. A girl and a boy couldn't sit together. The school employed disciplinarians to roam around the school and monitor this activity. If found, you would get reprimanded. If found repeating the offense, you get sent to the principal's office and, if continuing, eventually escalated to the parents. I feel like escalation to the parents is the best case here, no? Like, wouldn't the parents hear of this and be like, are you kidding me? That's the rule, that's the hill you're dying on, school? I can't think of a parent in their right mind who would actually uphold this rule. Ah yes, let's just segregate the genders. That'll be good. Surely nothing bad comes of that. Story 12. No backpacks in the halls. Oh yeah, because carrying all of our books between classes was a great freaking idea. Plus hardly any time between classes to exchange books meant carrying multiple classes things at once. Edit. Looks like this is the norm for quite a few people in school districts, but it doesn't make the rule any less stupid. But to be fair, it depends on your school. My middle school was 8 or so classes a day with 3 minutes in between, and it was a large school where classes could be far away from your locker. My high school was 4 classes and a much smaller building, but my friend's high school was similar to my middle school situation. Story 13. No playing on the mini golf course. Due to the school having mineral rights on oil land in the mid-70s, our school system had huge amounts of money. One thing they did was get 9 concrete animals on the playground for miniature golf. These looked like a lot of fun to play on for the kids, and they were concrete, so they were indestructible. They took about a third of the absolute center of the playground. We could not touch them, play on them, or get anywhere near them. In PE, we broke out the putters once, in all of grade school. A few years later, they had the high school seniors take them out with sledgehammers. Story 14. Zero tolerance to bullying. The faculty were the worst ones, too many double standards. They had no problem enforcing it when a student was doing the bullying, but did absolutely nothing to punish teachers when they did it. Story 15. We weren't allowed to wear plain red, blue, yellow, or white tees because of the White Tee song, and thought there were t-shirt gangs. A second one was named after my crew. We weren't allowed to have any comic or anime artwork during school hours, and students couldn't exchange money with each other unless the teacher approved. Story 16. We weren't allowed to play tag football at lunch, only frisbee. When I asked the principal what the difference was, he responded with a sarcastic tone, "A football is round and a frisbee is a flat disc." He left the school later that year, went to another school, and a few years later was brought up on charges for failing to report the abuse of a student by a teacher. Story 17. In elementary school, only grade 5 or 6 to grade 8 ate in the lunchroom. We would have a lunch monitor stand at one end of the cafeteria watching all of us eat, and none of us were allowed to get up. The only reason we could stand up was to go to the washroom, and we would have to raise our hand to be allowed to stand. When the lunch recess bell was about to ring, we would have to be dismissed table by table to throw out our garbage and before we headed out. Story 18. Conservative Christian College. A group of us played Age of Empires one weekend. They didn't like it and called a meeting. Everyone involved got misdemeanors on their record. There was nothing in the handbook about it being against the rules. The only person that didn't get any punishment was the son of the president, even though he was just as involved as the rest of us. It was quite interesting explaining the write-up on my record when I transferred. So, you got a misdemeanor for what? Story 19. Always had to have your shirt tucked in. Not a uniform, but literally any casual clothes that were worn to school had to be tucked in. Basketball shorts and tank top? Tucked, or you get sent home. Jeans and long sleeve? Tucked. So freaking goofy and authoritarian. But this was in a rural school in the South, so I'm not surprised. I was a rebellious 16-year-old at the time, and it made me upset like nothing ever has. I can't even imagine why this rule would exist. Is it just to make you guys look stupid? Like, I would love to hear the rationale behind this one. Story 19. The belt rule. If you were wearing a shirt that was cut to be tucked in, you were required to wear a belt with it. I'm convinced it was an excuse for the principal to line everyone up so he could walk by and look at all of our butts. Total creep. Story 21. Early 80s. May. Girls in miniskirts, guys in running shorts. The miniskirt issue has been settled by courts years earlier, and miniskirts were protected by law. Principal goes into a conference, and the VP bans running shorts as a, quote, distraction. Football team shows up in miniskirts. I almost hit on the middle linebacker. He was full drag and looked fine from behind. Story 22. No touching the walls. They restored a building with historic value using, among other things, period-appropriate paints. They then opened the planned primary school there and proceeded to try to get children to respect the restoration work, so we had a few years of benches in the hallways being 10 centimeters from the wall, and children being reprimanded for leaning against the wall before the faculty gave up. Story 23. No brand name anything in the lunchroom. So you couldn't bring a small pack of, say, Doritos in your lunch. It had to be in a clear plastic sandwich bag. Also, no food or beverage allowed in class. This included bottled water. As an adult, I now know the terrible headaches and migraines I suffered in my teen years were caused by dehydration, because we were only allowed to drink from the nasty water fountain. Story 24. The high school I went to for part of 11th grade banned, quote, work boots, army boots, and hiking boots. I don't know what their issue was with boots. I wore a pair of knee-high punk boots. They weren't work boots, army boots, or hiking boots. They made me take them off anyway. The next high school had the same rules. I wore the same boots and made the same argument. They let me wear them while calling them hooker boots in the office. They weren't hooker boots either, just plain, black, knee-high leather boots. Story 25. Around 2011/2012, my school tried to ban yoga pants because it's easier to see the butts. A ton of guys started showing up in yoga pants to protest. Some because they liked seeing the butts, and some because the girls had way too many dress code regulations already. My school got on the news and was embarrassed. The administrators were so embarrassed, in fact, the rule was reversed. Story 26. In elementary school, they banned running entirely. No running on the playground either. They also banned all ball sports and would take your ball if you took it in from home, and they would put it in the gym cupboard to be used during PE class. Keep in mind these were 4 to 11-year-olds, so everyone ignored the rules and so many were in, quote, detention. I'm not sure what we called it. So they just dropped the rule and nothing came of it. But the second rule about ball sports, well, it turned out that one of the kids in the year below me had brought in a signed soccer ball by a really famous player, and the school took it and kept it. We found out because there was a very angry mother screaming at the secretary that they effectively stole something that could be worth upwards of $1,000. They obviously gave back the ball and stopped stealing them. Who would have thought that stealing from kids was a bad idea? Huh. Story 27. I went to school in the UK. If you were too warm and wanted to take off your blazer, tough crap. To take off your blazer, everyone in the classroom had to take it off so you all looked the same. If someone was opposed to taking it off, you all had to keep it on. Sitting next to the radiator was a pain in the butt. During the summer months, we'd have designated non-blazer days. These were days when the school was probably scared of accidentally murdering students by forcing them to wear blazers. I am so thankful that the private school I went to was way more lax with the dress code rules. Like they had them, we had a uniform and everything. But if it was hot, just put the blazer on the back of your chair. If you forgot your blazer, whatever. You'll get a small talking to, but it's no big deal. That's really how it should be. If the rules are there for good intentions, you don't need to get angry at kids for screwing it up or even just, I don't know, not wanting to die from overheating. Story 28. Red, royal blue, camouflage, and solid brown were banned colors because of gang affiliation. They even went as far as making us cut all the JanSport logos off our backpacks. Boy, was my mom mad when my brand new backpack came home with a slash in it from the teacher not paying attention while, quote, ridding me of my gang affiliation. Story 29. Oh boy, where do I begin? Middle school. For the record, this was all at a private religious school in Asia. Colored socks were banned. Students cannot bring hot sauce for lunch. Girls and boys could not have gym at the same time. If there was any overlap in locker room use, they were next to each other. Boys couldn't leave the locker room at the same time as the girls. They had to sit in the locker room and wait for the girls to leave first, lest we ever see the girls in gym shorts. Halloween and any discussion of Halloween, including costumes, banned. No speaking any language except English. No attempting to check out books above your reading level. You were not allowed to sit alone. Students sitting alone would be assigned friends. Being late for any reason was put on your permanent record, so mine says I was late to homeroom by 10 minutes. You can't bring refillable water bottles to class, but juice boxes are permitted. No students are permitted on school property after hours unless in a sport. Cardigans are banned. Boys can't roll up their sleeves even in summer. Girls' socks cannot go over knees. Skirts need to be 4 inches below knee. Colored bras are not allowed. Male students may not have long hair. Students may not color their hair. One Asian girl with naturally light brown hair hair was forced to dye hers black. Students bringing outside reading materials into school must first have them approved and stamped by the school librarian as acceptable. Unauthorized materials will be confiscated. Students may not bring their own lunches unless they have an allergy. All food must be purchased from the school cafeteria. School nurse is not permitted to do anything without parental permission. I once had to bandage my own leg with paper towels and tape. Nurse cannot give anything ingestible such as ibuprofen without a written doctor's note. Students may not call their parents. Cell phones are all turned into homeroom teacher at the start of the day, and calls out must be placed from the school office. Zero tolerance policy towards, quote, bullying, and defending yourself counts. Oddly enough, skateboarding was allowed, but bikes had to be locked up outside campus. Students may not play on the field at recess, as that was reserved for sports use only. Instead, we were forced to play on the concrete. Hats were banned. Pokemon was banned. Discussing World of Warcraft was banned as it was demonic. Choker-style necklaces were not allowed. There was a maximum amount of money that students were allowed to have on their person. Eventually, they banned cash entirely, though, and all students could use was just a school card thing. Students all had to participate in group prayer regardless of faith or lack thereof. If you missed the bus, you could not come to school, even if a parent tried to drop you off. The bus was not permitted to go or stop anywhere except for its few drop-off points. Even if your house was along the way or very far away, you'd pass your house and have to walk back like half a mile to it. Hoodies were banned because hoodies were for gang members. You couldn't have your hands in your pockets because, quote, you could be concealing a knife. Locks on lockers were not allowed. Bags were subject to random searches by teachers/guards looking for drugs. PDA was not allowed. Students may not use the bathroom during class. My friend was one of the few exceptions as he had a bladder/kidney issue. I think at one point they almost tried to ban tampons and insisted on pads only, but some girls' parents raised hell and they backed down. Sex ed was removed, then upon complaints re-implemented, but was to be taught by the school chaplain, a likely virgin priest. At one point, they tried to implement corporal punishment, spanking, caning, etc., and the school board had the votes as they always did, but thankfully many teachers refused and threatened to resign, so the board backed down. The school used to be relatively normal, but a bunch of evangelical missionary families moved there and took over the parent administrator board and implemented all these ridiculous rules. Ironically, the only girl still permitted to wear a cardigan was the daughter of the main evangelical mother in charge of the parental board of the school. Why? So she could hide all of her self-harm wounds/scars. I bet her home life was fun. Anyway, once my parents learned all of this, they took me out, and I'm so glad they did. I heard things returned to normal about 5 years later, after all the missionaries left to inflict their wrath on some other unfortunate community. Thankfully, my parents took me out, and my new school was totally awesome. I'd blocked a lot of this from my memory in hindsight, but wow, middle school was a prison. High school and college, fairly normal, except in high school, students were no longer allowed to leave campus unless they were Terry so he could smoke. He was the school's star student, and taking the bus home after club activities required you to register for it a week in advance. Even if they had room on it, you would be kicked off and forced to taxi home. And college. Not permitted to be in an intimate relationship with anyone on your floor. You couldn't room with anyone who was not in your freshman year dorm building, even in later years. So senior year, I couldn't room with my best friend because freshman year, he roomed in a different building. I want to be mad with OP and be like, oh, the middle school rules was ridiculous. There's so many. I'm way too, stun-locked just thinking about how OP remembered this. I don't remember my middle school rules that well at all. OP listed like a billion. I'm just impressed. Story 30. Our school once ruled that PE did not end when the bell rang, but before? You were supposed to be out of there before the bell rang. It ended, thankfully, once an entire class ignored it and just did their thing like it had always been done, before psychos achieved majority in the ruling body. Story 31. Where do I even begin with my school? 1. Bathrooms were locked during school, including passing period. If you wanted to go, you needed an office aide to escort you, and only 1 to 5 students could go at once, and it would be only girls or only boys, not both. 2. No one was allowed to carry anything on them. You had to lock all of your belongings in one empty room because we had no lockers and they didn't plan on giving us any. 3. Everyone had to move in cohorts, meaning you had the same students in all your classes and you were not allowed to move freely during passing period. Your teacher from your last class would escort you in a line to your next class. 4. All cohorts had to line up at traffic cones outside the cafeteria, which was separated from the main building. The vice principal would not let your class eat unless you were all 100% quiet. 5. No one would leave the cafeteria until everyone was silent, and then you would leave by class. If anyone talked, everyone had to sit back down. 6. you had to give up your phones to the teacher. If you didn't, and you were caught with it, you were suspended. 7. If your class is causing a disturbance, the whole class is suspended. I'm pretty sure I went to a prison. Story 32. This isn't really a rule, but I'm still mad about it, so here goes. I was like 8 and I tripped on the playground, which was in the parking lot, and I ate concrete. My nose was bleeding, I had gravel in my mouth. I was a sobbing mess. I got rushed to the nurse's office, and when I sat on the table, my saline spray fell out of my hoodie pocket. For those unfamiliar, saline spray is a little bottle with a nozzle on the end that you stick in your nose and then squeeze the bottle, putting saline water up your sinus and moisturizing stuff. It's literal salt water. I used it often because I would get awful nosebleeds due to getting dried out, and this was the only thing that helped. Now the nurse picked up the bottle and just started questioning me like I had murdered someone. "What's this? How did you get this in here? Does your mom know about this? Why did you steal this?" Now, I'm a bleeding mess, barely coherent, sobbing and stuff. My lip was torn up. I looked like I just fought a bear. I'm also, as previously mentioned, 8. So I answer while I wait for some help against the blood gushing down my face. I explain it's mine and I use it and Mom gave it to me and can I please have some help? But this woman, this God-forsaken, evil woman, kept my spray, gave me a wet frickin' paper towel, and just sat down at her computer and started tapping away. So, like 15 minutes later of scrubbing my open flesh with a falling apart paper towel, the bleeding has finally stopped. But oh, surprise, surprise, I'm still in pain due to, I don't know, the gravel buried in my face. I wouldn't stop sobbing and refused to go back to class. So she finally hands over the phone and tells me to call my mom. I do, and a few minutes later she comes to pick me up and take me home for the day. Then the nurse pulls her aside and confides about the fact I stole a prescription and refused to stop lying about the ownership of the frickin' salt water. Mom is understandably like, "What the hell are you on about? It's salt water. It's available at Kroger, and it's not a prescription." So the nurse gets all huffy and insists I can't have medicinal devices without the school board's permission and I need to be written up. In the end, I didn't. But I did lose the ability to use my spray, and I was in the nurse's office about 3 times more than ever due to, surprise, constant nosebleeds. The nurse also ended up making a rule where if you had to use chapstick, you had to get a nurse pass and do it in the office to make sure you weren't, quote, misusing it. I wish I was joking. Man, I hated that lady. She was a nut job. Every time we go through a stupid school thread for any reason, and I don't mean the threads are stupid, just like threads about schools being stupid, I always see an unfortunate number of posts about nurses. Maybe my expectations are too high, but I, to put it simply, expect more. That's not unreasonable, is it? Story 33. You are only allowed to enter the school at certain doors. Hear me out. Before you say, "Well, yeah, that makes sense," the student parking was in front of the school, and you walked up a hill to the school. The L-shaped cafeteria was the main entrance point for those who drove, but you could only use one single set of double doors in the cafeteria, which were located at the bend of the L. The ones near what would be the top of the L were off limits, despite only being about 100 feet away. Right next to those cafeteria doors were the doors to the arena lobby. Yep, not allowed to come in there either. You also weren't allowed to use the auditorium entrance, despite it having a direct connection to the main hallway. What happened was around 1,000 students all trying to squeeze through a single set of double doors over the course of 10 minutes or so. Those who rode the bus could enter any door they wanted at the back of the school where buses unloaded. Now, when leaving school, you could literally use any door. They didn't care at all. Story 34. If you didn't have a hat, you couldn't do PE. Really, it's not dumb, especially in the Australian sun, but that's as far as stupid rules ever went at my high school. It was awesome. Seriously, school uniform consisted of, so long as you're mostly wearing the school colors, and by year 11, they were happy so long as you turned up wearing pants. Story 35. So I attended a very strict private religious college. Didn't realize the extent of the rules until I was already a student. Here are just a few of the rules they had. If any of these were broken, you got demerits or kicked out, depending on so many different factors. Lights out was 10 p.m. on weekdays, 11 p.m. on weekends. Women and men couldn't touch each other, like, at all. They had different elevators, staircases, and different dorms. Couples got super weird and would have their faces like an inch apart and just stare into each other's eyes. eyes. We called it making eye babies. I saw one couple spit ice cubes back and forth into each other's mouths, but they weren't touching, so totally fine. Women under 23 couldn't leave the campus unless they were in groups of 3 or more. Men could leave the campus alone no matter what age. We were required to go to the on-campus church every Sunday and attend chapel every weekday at 10 a.m., unless we had specific permission to miss. If we had to miss a service for any reason, we were required to make it up on the weekend. They recorded every service and had video church every Saturday. There are so many other insane rules at the college, but I'm breaking out in hives just thinking about my time there and have to stop myself. Spitting ice cubes back and forth into each other's mouths is one of the funniest yet grossest things I've ever heard. Like, it's just not intimate enough for me to be like, I get it, because I don't get it. But it's not that kind of like loophole-y stuff that, I don't know, is more stereotypical, I guess, between religious couples or couples with rules. I don't know, ice cubes into each other's... Surely there's something better. That being said, stupid rule. I'm not justifying that at all. Story 36. So many. No facial hair. No earrings for boys. No hats. Shirts have to be tucked in. Only natural hair colors. Display ID at all times. Only clear or mesh backpacks, and then they have to be stored in the locker all day. No open-toed shoes. No sagging pants. No holes in jeans, cutoffs, etc. That's just off the top of my head. Early 90s public middle school in Southwest Houston. The following year, they switched to uniforms. I live in Oregon now. Portland Public Schools dress code is basically, shirts and dresses must have fabric in the front and on the sides. And that's it. My kid has no idea. Story 37. My son's teacher said to not bring his notebook to school anymore. Yes, a notebook. She said it caused a distraction because he's always writing in it. Yes, writing, not doodling. Writing. He was in first grade, and thus the problem with public schools. Story 38. Dang, American schools are strict. I live in Estonia, and reading through these comments, I feel like I live in a paradise. Our school doesn't even have an enforced dress code, and the first thing our principal told us was that there are no strict rules in this school because we believe you're smart enough to not do anything too stupid. So don't use our trust in you in a bad way, and don't break our property. One teacher wanted us to write down what time we leave and return to and from the bathroom, but this rule was soon forgotten. Story 39. No bras showing. No flagging, no straps. Girls were supposed to be modest and cover their bras, so the varsity boys got new uniforms. Their old uniforms were given to the JV girls team. Jerseys with open sides and fit for 17 to 18-year-old boys were given to 15 to 16-year-old girls. If they stood still, you could almost not see their bras, but while playing, their jerseys swung completely from the opposite side of one cup to the other. Story 40. Couldn't go to your car in the parking lot during passing period. It wasn't off school property or anything, so you basically had to carry all your books until you could switch them out at lunch. My wrist was sprained and I could barely hold everything I needed in my backpack and my arm, and I went to my car to drop some books. I got screamed at. Like, okay, force me to carry crap when I'm literally injured. Just glad I never crap myself at school because I wouldn't be allowed to go to my car to get new clothes. Story 41. My high school was notoriously chill. Large rural school, not a lot of bad influence. But for some reason, my senior year, I ended up with multiple teachers that were strictly anti-phone. Namely, my study hall teacher who had literally just graduated college. His little brother was a high school student and their mom also taught at the school. God forbid anyone tried to do their schoolwork on their phone. The mirror in the back of the room meant no one could screw around on their Chromebook either. I tried to sit there and read or do work like a good student, except this teacher's favorite, the choir kids, were always horsing around and dancing and crap. It's so freaking hard to study for finals when I'm already mildly attention deficit, and now choir kids are prancing around the room and snapping their gum. I was so close to taking the issue to the principal, but school ended in March and that saved that teacher's butt. Story 42. They wanted us to sing the hymn of our country and our city every week. No, not a military school. I used to just sit and protest and say to other students I wasn't going to do that because it was fascist. One day I got called out for that by the principal, so I started pretending to sing and proceeded to tell people how fascist the whole thing was. Story 43. No color or logo on shoes. I saw multiple kids actually get sent home and told not to return until they bought other shoes. They just had a blue Adidas logo on the tongue, and the rest of the shoe was all black. Seriously? What's the problem? We come here to learn, and I can understand not letting people wear certain clothing, but sending a kid home for that just blew my mind. Oh, good luck trying to find a shoe without any logos on it whatsoever. That's like 80+% of shoe designs. I'm sure you could find some, but that seems pretty far out of your way to go for just shoes for school? That really shouldn't matter. Story 44. Not really dumb, but really sexist. They would dress code the girls for wearing leggings without something covering their butt, or something with too much stomach or shoulders showing. However, when a dude decided to wear a very short crop top and booty shorts to a game during an assembly, nobody said a word. Of course, the student body was livid, but there was nothing we could do about it. Story 45. No candy at lunch. Nothing unhealthy actually at all, so no cookies or soda. I had a Lunchables and the teacher confiscated my Snickers Mini that came with it. Even though I was young, it still felt wrong that an adult was coming over and taking my food from me at lunch. Edit. Oh, and you couldn't take a medicine that wasn't administered by the nurse. A kid was having an allergic reaction and they dragged him to the nurse's office so he could use his EpiPen. If your shirt came untucked, you had to write a 1,000-word essay. Boys had to wear a tie or sweater at all times. We would run the mile in PE in a tie with our shirts tucked in. We had literally no passing period in middle school. If you needed to get your books from your locker, you were sprinting. If you were late, essay to write. The books were thick as hell. I think carrying a 60-pound backpack at young ages stunted my growth. Story 46. This one is not as bad as others, but when I was in freshman year of high school, we had some sort of communication book. I don't know how to translate it. It was meant to be a way to show your parents your test grades and other stuff, and your parents had to sign every single thing. And the first teacher of the day would inspect if you had shown it to your parents or not, and if you hadn't, you'd get 15 minutes of detention for every unsigned thing the next week. Since I was lazy and also a forgetful kid, I somehow managed to get 3.5 hours of detention once, which was honestly a pain in the butt. No one was there, not even a teacher. I was alone with the cleaning lady for the whole time, watching through the window asking why I was forced to such bullcrap. It's been almost 20 years and I'm still salty about it. The next year they reverted the stupid thing, but I lost 3.5 hours of my life that I won't get back. Story 47. We didn't have doors on our stalls for the first 2 years of high school. Not sure why. Could have been doors that were broken over time and just never replaced. Taking a crap was an issue. Learned how to take really fast craps. Get paper all ready for tactical wipes. Sucked when you needed more wipes than you made. Usually, if you were caught taking a crap, you got the wet paper towels raining at you, more so once doors got put up. I feel like this is just a basic privacy concern. For some reason in my head I'm like, is this even legal? It feels like it has to violate something, but maybe I'm wrong. Story 48. You weren't allowed to wear an undershirt that wasn't white. We had a dress code at my school where you had to wear a collared shirt. They didn't really care about the color or the design, except you couldn't have really big words or logos on them. One day I actually got detention because I had on a black shirt underneath my collared shirt. The dean that wrote me up really hated me, so of course it was a really obscure rule that no one really cared about. But he liked to get me in trouble for whatever dress code violation he could. I actually got in so much trouble that I was voted most likely to be out of dress code my senior year. But that had to be the dumbest reason. Story 49. No water bottles because you, quote, might put vodka in them. And kids weren't allowed to carry their meds with them. They had to remain in the clinic. Well, this seems reasonable until you think about emergency meds like an inhaler. The clinic was very far away from the gym and up a flight of stairs. The gym teachers could not hold on to the inhaler for you. If you had an asthma attack, nobody else could go fetch the inhaler for you. You had to somehow get your own self to the clinic or just die, I guess? Now extrapolate that for EpiPens, insulin, etc. I'm shocked nobody literally died. Story 50. My school actually enforced the opposite by having an optional wear your gang colors to school day. It was supposed to bring together kids from gangs and prevent conflict in the high crime rate neighborhood, but we just saw it as an out of uniform day. This was ironic, considering my friend had gotten suspended since they thought his Call of Duty phone wallpaper was gang-related a year prior. Story 51. In elementary and middle school, the poor kids on free or reduced to lunch cost plans had to eat in a segregated room off the main cafeteria. Then, once they ate, they could go back into the main room. Very poor shaming and put a horrible stigma on them. If you were one of the kids whose parents made just a bit too much to get reduced to lunch, but your parents still couldn't afford to pay for lunch every day, it was worse. They gave you a free piece of bread, a slice of government cheese, and a baggie with like 10 saltines in it. You had to take your shame meal in a baggie up to the principal's office, eat in there, and when you're done you had to call your parents to guilt trip them to pay for their kid, while the principal put it on speakerphone. There was like a 2-week period where I had to call every day and could tell my mom was crying. Story 52. Like in a couple of other comments, my school was just sure there were gangs everywhere. They sent out a bulletin with 2 errors. 1. They said we couldn't call people, quote, homie with 2 M's. I don't remember anyone saying homie before that, but we had a couple of good weeks of saying homie. On the English side, it said students could be suspended. On the Spanish side, it said they could be expelled. I'm sure it was a translation error of some kind, but kids were saying that the school would expel the fewer Latino kids and only suspend the many white kids for the same offense. Or that the school wanted to scare the Spanish-only parents into being really hard on their kids without scaring the English parents, maybe? Story 53. At my daughter's school, they sent home a letter I had to sign informing us that if kids are caught using their phones in class, the phone would be taken away for the rest of the year. If we sign, we agree to this rule. Now, my daughter had extra classes after school, which would sometimes take 30 minutes, sometimes 2 hours, depending on what she was struggling with. She would phone me when done so I could come pick her up. I marched in there and told them if they take her phone, which is actually my property since I paid for it, I would be there the next day with the police to get it back. Find some other way to punish her if she uses her phone in class. Don't be idiots. Then they would constantly harass her, telling her to convince us to sign the damn letter agreeing to the phone thing. Had to march in there again. Such a pathetic school. Bunch of power-tripping morons. Edit. There was also a time they decided kids are not allowed to drink water during an exam. No leaving the class, not water bottles, not even a jug of water in the class. Because they might cheat. This was during a heat wave, and none of their classes had AC. Daughter came home dehydrated, eyes sunken, lethargic, dry lips, headache, and I march in there again. A few years after she left, I heard via the grapevine that some of the parents were suing them for human rights violations. Never found out what incident prompted that, but was happy to hear it. Story 53. I have to send kids to change their socks if they're not plain white ones. So they miss half a class over being in the wrong socks. It's infuriating. I also taught at a school that made kids run laps if they were late to homeroom after that class. But that meant they were late for my class first up. So they were punished for being late, but the consequence resulted in them being late. I'll never understand any punishment in school that involves preventing kids from learning more, like being late to classes or just straight up suspended. It really doesn't make sense to me. Because you're an institution to teach these children, and then if they do something wrong and you pull them out of classes, they're no longer learning to punish them. Instead of teaching them why not to do what they did or whatever, you just send them home for a week or something. I know that's pretty far removed from what this was talking about, but it just got me thinking because they're missing part of a class. Story 55. Almost enforced. Dividing the cafeteria by gender. Backstory. This happened in middle school. Before lunch, we'd be in a class which we would call Class A. We had 2 lunch periods, one at the end of Class A and one at the beginning of Class B. After lunch, we went straight to Class B. For whatever stupid reason, they wanted us to sit with our classes at lunch. This rule was just 100% power tripping, as we went to a different class after, so it's not like it makes transitions easier or anything. And even if it did, let people sit with who they want. People never followed the rule, obviously, so one day a supervisor randomly walked in class one day and announced the cafeteria would be divided into 2 sides, boys and girls. Yes, they told us their stupid reasoning. They said if we started sitting with our classes again, they might consider not doing it. Still, no one followed the rules. One student even asked what sitting with our class even had to do with the gender, and they had no answer. Everyone got upset and talked about protesting by sitting in the middle of the floor, and the school never enforced it. I guess either from angry students and or parents, or maybe we shaped up, whatever. I hated that school with every ounce of my body. A complete crap show in numerous ways. Story 56. A rule my school has is seated lunch, basically knocking 15 to 20 minutes off of our lunch break. We have to sit down and have the teachers watch us eat, like most of us wouldn't eat if we weren't forced to or something. Most of us are smart enough to eat when we're hungry. We're given detentions if we don't sit down in our assigned places to eat. Story 57. So school shootings in our area, and the US in general, became more known, and threats along with them. So my school decided to draw blue lines across campus in various places. They then told us for our safety during all lunches and breaks we could not pass the blue lines nor use the upstairs bathrooms. We were all mad because what the hell? Keeping us contained is perfect for someone to just open up on us. We're packed like sardines into the lower campus and quad. Eventually, they laid off the upper campus bathroom rules. The next year's when they laid off the blue lines rules, which sucks because we had to deal with it for a year, but I was cool with the upper campus guards, so I was able to go through some cracks. Yeah, I gotta know what their intention was here. Keeping you all contained is somehow supposed to fight against school shootings? I don't get it. Did they think people were gonna, walk to their lockers to get a gun during lunch? I don't know. Maybe I'm too Canadian for this. But OP doesn't seem to understand it either. Story 58. I graduated in 1984, so this may not be what you're looking for. When I was a freshman, 81 to 90 was a B, and 91 to 100 was an A. No problem. We got a new principal for my sophomore year, and she wanted the scale to be raised so we could be more college-like. A B was then raised to 87 to 93, and an A was 94 to 100. The teachers and students didn't like this, and we tried to have it changed, but no luck. In my junior year, the principal raised the scale to 89 to 94 for a B, and 95 to 100 for an A. The teachers said no and that they wouldn't do this, but the principal still got her way. Some of the students actually sent in bomb threats to the principal's house, but eventually the principal won. In my senior year, the principal tried to raise the scale again, and the teacher said they would go to the school board. The school board sided with the teachers, and the principal got a new job with another high school, but not as principal. I think when I went from high school to university, the scale went down. I think it got easier to get an A. I don't remember exactly, but I think an A in my university started at 80%, and in high school it started at 85. So I don't know what this principal was on about. Story 59. They tried to ban purses. The day it started, a girl walked around with what I swear was a Costco-sized box of tampons and displayed it prominently on her desk. The ban was quickly reversed, but a bag size limit was put in place. I will say it was a generous bag size, not big enough to include totes, but they could have went smaller than they did if they wanted to be jerks. Story 60. I have a couple of dumb rules, but being in a southern state, more than a couple of the students liked to wear boots. The rule makes the students who wear long pants untuck them, as in the pant leg has to go over the boot. It was honestly stupid. You could hide a gun, knife, etc. in a boot alone, but with the pants leg over the boot, it was like a hidden sleeve. Story 61. Anything dress code related was only enforced if you were a problem student. If the teachers liked you or if your parents were rich and donated, then you could get away with a rainbow mohawk. That legitimately happened. But in my case, I managed to upset the she-devil of an assistant principal and was completely in the right for the situation she was angry about. After several minutes of floundering, she said, "And you're going to have to cut that off. It's against dress code," while smirking and gesturing at a single square inch of purple in my hair. Not even a minute after she was done saying that, one of the faculty's kids came into the office with his traditional head of navy blue hair that he'd been keeping dyed for 2 years. I got my GED the same year. My kids will be homeschooled. Okay. I don't think homeschooling is necessarily the answer here. There's a happy medium in between. But hey, they're your kids, OP. You do you. I've got nothing in particular against homeschooling. It just seems like quite a leap to make. Not every school is like this. Story 62. I was a prefect in my school and usually guarded the English block where some of the toilets that people used at lunch were. For some reason, people were only allowed to use the toilets for the first half hour of lunch and then not allowed to use them for the last half hour. It was my job to tell people they couldn't use them if they came in the last half hour. Of course, this rule is stupid. So I'd usually let people use it anyway, because I'm not about to tell a guy in a year or two above mine that he can't go pee. One time, one of the hard English teachers saw me letting a dude in and berated me for not doing my job. Kinda had an argument with her and asked her what I was meant to do if they just went in, because that's usually what people did. She said I couldn't physically stop them, but I couldn't leave my post to go get someone. So for the rest of the year, when someone came in at the last half hour of lunch, I would just say, "Hey, you're not supposed to use the bathroom right now, but if you do, I can't physically stop you or leave to grab someone, so go ahead." Teacher pulled me aside about it a few times, but couldn't exactly punish me because I was following exactly what she said. Story 63. Not punishing girls. They can't even scold them. Not the teacher and not anyone. So just imagine this happens a lot. Some girls are at the back talking all loud, taking advantage of the stupid rule. And the teacher says, "All boys stand up," even though they know it's not the boys' fault. We talked to the principal about this and complained to our parents and ended up always ignored. And almost all schools in my area have the same rule. I want to admit in any girl school in my area because hitting or punishing any kid there gets the teachers in trouble. Talk about double standards. Story 64. My elementary school had these stupid stoplights in the lunchroom that would turn red if we were too loud. So there we were, 107-year-olds that couldn't talk above a whisper because every time it went red, we would lose 5 minutes of our 15-minute recess. Because the best way to make energetic kids that have been sitting at a desk for too long would be to take away the one thing that lets them work it off. Story 65. In 8th grade, water bottles of all kind, transparent and opaque, were banned because some kid had the bright idea of bringing a clear water bottle filled with vodka into class and passing it around. The teacher caught wind after catching, wind of the smell. For the rest of the year, kids were not allowed to have any kinds of water bottles. If you were thirsty, you had to hope the teacher would let you go to the water fountain, or you had to buy a Coke Zero from the vending machine. Oh, I could only imagine what would happen if they filled a Coke Zero can with whiskey. Then it would be water fountain time for you. Story 66. We weren't allowed to say Chad. One of the most popular teachers at the school got a new boyfriend, and she made the mistake of telling the students his name. His name was Chad. All the students started using Chad whenever they could. Fill in the blank responses, story assignments, writing it on the walls, team names, nicknames for each other, name tags, etc. The school decided to punish those who said it after some time. Crazy times. Story 67. At no point could you have your phone. This seems pretty normal, until you take into account that you would have your phone taken off you until tomorrow if you were on it when the final bell went, and you were walking out of school. One time someone got their phone taken off them right before they left the gate because they were still on school grounds. It gets worse though. This was a zero tolerance thing. Parents in the hospital? Oh, too bad. Have proof you did your homework on your phone? That's a shame. Can't show it. Literally just using it as a calculator to do homework on break? Hand it over. You'll get it back at the end of the day. One of my friends used it to quickly check the time since in the lunch hall there were no clocks and none of us had watches, and a teacher saw and wouldn't stop yelling at her to hand it over. I got a detention for pointing out that the teacher is just ignoring what my friend says and being a jerk dictator. Story 68. I'm old, but not that old. In the mid-90s, I got sent to the principal's office for listening to my Walkman at lunch. I was a good kid. It was the only time I ever spoke to the principal. I asked her why I wasn't allowed to have it, and she couldn't give me an answer. She pulled out the big old book of rules and let me sit in the waiting room to find the specific place it was mentioned, which, I know, right? All I could find is that students weren't supposed to carry expensive electronics for fear they would be lost or stolen. My Walkman was $10 from the Kmart, and the batteries were held in it with duct tape. It wasn't even a Discman. Anyhow, the principal kind of brushed it off and said I could do whatever I wanted. But whenever I had my Walkman on, some teacher would come up and bug me about it, and it just became a hassle, so I gave it up. Story 69. I went to a Catholic elementary school. We were all a bunch of 1st to 3rd graders. There was one rule that we couldn't break when we started drawing pictures for an assignment or just in general. You can only color the person either white or peach. This means you can't color them black, brown, yellow, etc. If you get caught, you're sent to a room where you have to pray to God where a cross is hanging on a wall while you beg for forgiveness for what you have sinned. Then, in about 5 to 15 minutes, you're out of the room and back to what you're doing. As someone who is a visible minority, I just think this is hilarious. Like, what do you mean? What an absolutely insane rule, first of all. And the punishment is even funnier. What sin have they committed? Oh no, they drew a person with brown skin. They're going to hell. Story 70. We had a weekly planner that had to be signed by parents every week, with a punishment for forgetting a signature. I just found mine last week whilst clearing out the loft, and one week read as the following. Monday, achieved 100% in advanced sciences exam. Tuesday, achieved a solid B grade on RE examination, which he should aim to consolidate upon throughout the year. Wednesday, after school detention on Thursday, weekly planner not signed. Really reminded me how petty and power tripping my teachers were. I'm so sorry I forgot an arbitrary signature whilst I was busy achieving 100% for you. Perhaps if we didn't have multiple exams a week to cram our heads full of knowledge for, then the petty crap might not filter out so easily. Story 71. Girls' underwear could not be colored. The summer uniform was a white dress and the winter uniform had a white blouse. Both were made of pretty thin material, so anything other than plain white bras showed through. Even nude/skin-colored stuff got pulled up. A lot of girls got sent home before the rule got relaxed. Story 72. Banned our school bags. So we had to put everything in our locker and hold all our books and pencil cases for 2 periods, then go back to our locker after. We hated this rule, so a load of girls grabbed handfuls of tampons to carry around with us to protest the stupid rule. We were allowed bags the very next day. They also tried to enforce school drawstring bags. They made the year 7s and 8s try out these cheaply made paper bag things for a few days before enforcing them on the school. They all broke before lunch. That rule was also scrapped that very day. Why? Why do schools hate bags so much? I never knew this was a thing. Bags are, a lot of them at least, very purpose-made for school. Why do schools hate them? Story 73. You weren't allowed to bring anything unhealthy into the school for lunch if you brought your own lunch. If a teacher saw you with something unhealthy, you would get a lecture and your parents were contacted. It was all part of their healthy eating school scheme. Meanwhile, the school dinners would serve you with healthy classics such as mac and cheese, pizza, brownies, among other things. Most people opted for a school dinner in the end. Story 74. My middle school tried to enforce no logos or imagery larger than 2 by 2 inches of any kind. Of course, this wasn't popular, and was increasingly ignored with no consequences as the school year went on. A troublemaker in my class wore an offensive shirt to class one day, and it was towards the end of the school year. I can't remember what her shirt depicted, but it was something about drug use. After the teacher told her that she was going to have to change or turn her shirt inside out, she took the first opportunity to point out I was also breaking the rules. The teacher had no choice but to call me out as well, but it was that my pants weren't compliant. Since I couldn't change pants, my mom was called to pick me up early. What was on my pants? A large flower design, bigger than 2 by 2 inches. I was sent home for wearing a flower pattern on my pants at 12 years old. Obviously, the rule only lasted a year. Story 75. No chapstick, lip gloss, or anything like it in middle school. This crap used to get on my nerves. And in high school, they had one teacher who forbid us from using anything with fragrance in it because she was allergic. No lotion, no hand sanitizer, no perfume, nothing. And this same teacher wouldn't let us put our hands on our face. Raging woman on a power trip. Okay, but the scent allergies are real. OP put allergic in quotes here, but I know multiple people who are allergic to scents. And they're serious reactions. I did have a teacher that would straight up get full body rashes from it. So I don't know if I can agree with you here, OP. Story 76. UK Comprehensive. All UK schools have a uniform for clarity to our American friends. A lot of the big comps also have a lower school and upper school, just as a way of identifying where classes were, as they are spread over large spaces. I know a few that were over a mile getting one end to the other. This school for its entire 100-odd years had been blazer/shirt and tie, and skirts or trousers for the girls. Guys could wear trousers or tailored shorts. Then my first year they randomly decided to change the summer uniform, so you could either wear shirt, tie, blazer, or you could wear polo shirts instead. Deputy head of lower. You don't need to tuck in the polo shirt. It looks pretty daft, so official policy is leave it untucked. Deputy head of upper. Detention and letter home for insubordination. Yes, insubordination was a word used in the letter. Head teacher. What the hell do you think you're wearing? You're supposed to be in a shirt, tie, blazer. Just putting a school logo on a polo shirt doesn't make it part of the uniform. Then you'd remind him of the uniform change and insist he'd ask the deputy head. And depending on which deputy head he asked, you were told off for tucking the shirt in or told off for having it untucked. You could tell the jerks from the goody-goodies real quick. The goody-goodies went back to shirt, tie, and blazer. The jerks would purposefully wear the shirt tucked in lower school and untucked in upper school. Teachers thought it was hilarious and refused to punish for the dress code because of the mixed messages. Just the three at the top that kept the argument for that summer term. Story 77. Running got banned in our school because two smooth-brained people ran full pelt into each other and put themselves in the hospital. So they banned running not just in the corridors and rooms, but during break and during PE. The replacement to running? Skipping. Seeing 22 teenage boys skipping after a soccer ball was somehow offensive to sports. At sports day, the school changed all the running events to skipping events, which is when parents decided that the school was being moronic and forced them to change. This doesn't sound real. This sounds like a skit, right? There's no way a school would think that works for sports. Although watching a whole field of people, essentially galloping after a ball is pretty funny. Story 78. Students were, quote, ruining the grass on the sports field, using it to sit on/play sports at lunch. So they put a fence up around the whole field with one little gate in. So now everyone legitimately using the field for at least 2 sports classes per week had to enter through one small space. It destroyed the grass all around the fence, since it got such increased footfall with thousands of students using it per week. It looked way worse than the apparent destruction from the light use of before. Story 78. My high school had an unofficial rule that was heavily enforced. The special ed students were not allowed to interact with the, quote, regular students. Every special ed kid would be escorted to every class, and if one regular student got too close, the teacher would scold them and tell them to stay away, as if the special ed kids were feral. Since it was an unofficial rule that wasn't written down or documented anywhere, the higher-ups didn't really pay attention when other kids spoke out about it. It only lasted for about 2 years until a new principal was hired and noticed it. He still didn't say anything about it, he just silently told the teachers to back off of it. Absolutely despicable. Story 80. I went to a private school for a few years and you had to pay money to the school to use your phones. They had this whole payment plan, $100 a quarter, and if you didn't pay it, no phones allowed. Also not really an official rule, but they said that I had to pray although I didn't observe their religion. Of course, I respected their religion as anyone should, but you can't force me to worship. Also progressed to mockery and stereotyping of my religion, and racial slurs not so much as targeted towards me, but towards African Americans. Yeah, that one. I got out of that hellhole as fast as I could. I remember the lunch lady told me, "Hey, don't forget to pray to the east before you eat," and started laughing at me. I'm not even Muslim, it's just my skin tone. Story 81. We had a uniform in middle school. Red, white, or black polo with black or khaki pants. We could make any combo we wanted with those colors except black polo with black pants. Apparently it was some gang thing. Little did they know I ended up wearing all black every day in high school anyway. Never got proposition to join a gang. Also, we weren't allowed to carry backpacks during the day. We had to keep our backpacks in our lockers and go between every class to get books or supplies. Thankfully, by my 8th grade year, they kind of relaxed a bit when it came to girls carrying small purses, so we could carry pads/tampons. Story 82. My school was run by idiots, and it's still rated the worst in my city 10 years later. 1. You could only eat in the main hall and outdoor hallway, and only the main hall if you bought food from there, so they were always packed with the younger kids, so the older kids had nowhere to eat. Couldn't eat on the field that had bins, and couldn't eat in the room you'd go to where you had free lessons with bins, so you were forced to sneak eat. It was ridiculous. 2. If you hadn't done any after-school club through all your school years, they would try to force you to do one on your last year, regardless of whether you were a carer for a relative and had to be home or for any other valid reason. 3. If you came to the school with the wrong trousers or shoes, etc., because let's say something happened to them and you were poor or whatever, they would tell you to get a slip from the office to take with you in lessons. But every freaking teacher you passed or went into lesson with would tell you off and most likely send you to isolation for the rest of the day like jerks. 4. You couldn't take the shortcut in the school. You had to go all the way around the school when you could just pass through a 7-meter hallway that no one used. Also, the school classroom layout sometimes meant you had to cut through a classroom to get to yours because there was no other way of getting there. And even though you had to go through or your teacher asked you to go through to get something, you'd get a hissy fit from another teacher because apparently cutting through a class that doesn't even give a crap is the end of their life. So you're screwed either way. 5. Being bald was banned. I'm not even joking. You weren't allowed to be bald because apparently it's a distraction, even though teachers were allowed to be bald. So God help if anyone had a medical condition where their hair falls out. 6. You had to have only black or blue bottoms in sports. You could have the most appropriate sports bottoms, but if they were gray or a tiny stripe of red, you can't take part. There's plenty more, but I try not to remember that crap hole. Story 83. In my last year with a month to go, my black shoes broke, so I came to school in my smart dark brown shoes. The deputy head would not let me into the building unless I took off my brown shoes and put on some of the disgusting communal plimsolls they save for when kids were wearing trainers. I flat out refused, as it seemed mad to me since I was wearing perfectly functional footwear. I'd never been in trouble before, but they got quite aggressive and sent me to isolation, basically a day of solitary confinement, as punishment. But I just left the school through a back door on my way and walked home. Sort of unrelated, but I've never heard the word plimsoll in my life. I could tell through the rest of it that this one was aggressively British, though. I just mean very British, I don't mean they were aggressive. But communal shoes in general, isn't that just like a sanitary concern? I guess they clean them probably, but I don't know. After reading this thread, I don't have all that much faith in schools, I guess. Story 84. I went to a high school that helped male athletes above everything else. America, think middle of nowhere farming, very redneck type town. The school would constantly hoard the athletic funding for the boys' team and give the female athletes leftover, used up, dirty, nasty equipment and uniforms from the boys' team when they would buy the boys' team new uniforms and equipment every single season. The worst was the uniforms. I'll never forget this. My girls' varsity soccer team was in the top 5 of our district, and we won many tournaments and championships. Our team had more trophies in the trophy case than the boys' soccer team. We begged for new uniforms, as the ones we had were horribly outdated, old, and had been passed to the team from the boys' team many years prior. The school decided to buy the boys' soccer team brand new uniforms and warm-up gear, and again, passed the boys' old uniforms to the girls. Most unwashed. Crap like this happened all of the time. We even had separate training fields, and the girls' training field was a glorified field that was mud every single time it rained, while the boys had a full pro-style field. Then there's the horrible double standard for code of conduct for male versus female athletes. The boys literally got away with sin and crime, while us girls had to darn near be nuns. Story 85. Not really a school enforcement, but a teacher in middle school enforced a no cell phone policy on me once. This was back in 2002, 2003. I had after-school club activities, so my parents gave me a cell phone so I could let them know when it was done. I finished up my club stuff and I was sitting on the steps outside of the school with my friend. I let my parents know we were ready, and as soon as I hung up, a teacher came out and confiscated my phone. This must have been around 5 p.m. because the sun was about to set. At the time, I was scared my parents were going to be mad at me for losing the phone. In hindsight, though, that was just a jerk move by the teacher. I get why teachers would hate phones. It's come up a lot in this thread. And yeah, they can be distracting, people can be messing around on them or whatever. But first of all, this was 2002, 2003. That's not a smartphone. If a kid in 2002 was pulling out their flip phone and trying to play Snake on it or whatever, you would hear those keys clack from across the classroom. They wouldn't be hiding anything. You don't need to take it away for the whole day for that. And also, outside, on the steps, like maybe 5 p.m., calling their parents. Who is this rule helping? Were they disrupting your class? Well, no, that can't be it. There were no classes. So really, I just can think of no reason why this would be a rule enforced. Anyway, after this fun thread, that's the last story. Did your school have any stupid rules that weren't mentioned here? There were a lot mentioned, so I'd be kind of surprised. But hey, if there were, throw them in the comments. For now, though, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.